Bernard L. Madoff, known to the world as Bernie, was a figure of immense respect and admiration on Wall Street. For decades he was seen as a financial genius, a self-made man who had built a powerful and legitimate investment firm from the ground up. He started his company, Bernard L. Madoff Investment Securities LLC, in 1960 with just a few $1,000s. Over the years, he transformed it into one of the most significant market-making businesses in the financial world. He was more than just a successful businessman. He was an innovator who helped pioneer the technology that would become the NASDAQ stock market, a fully electronic stock exchange. He lived a life of luxury, with beautiful homes in Manhattan, Palm Beach, and the south of France, along with private jets and exclusive yachts. This lifestyle was not seen as flashy or excessive, but rather as the deserved reward for a brilliant and hard-working man. People looked at Bernie Madoff and saw a pillar of the community, a philanthropist who gave generously to charities, and a trusted advisor who managed the fortunes of some of the world's wealthiest and most sophisticated investors. Behind this carefully constructed facade, however, was a secret of astonishing scale. The part of his business that made him a legend among investors, his exclusive wealth management arm, was a complete and total fabrication. To understand the magnitude of Madoff's crime, it is essential to first understand the type of fraud he committed, a Ponzi scheme. The concept is named after Charles Ponzi, a swindler who became infamous in the 1920s for using this method to defraud investors. Imagine you have a magic box. You tell people that if they put their money in the box, it will grow by 10% every year, guaranteed. The first person gives you $100. A year later, you need to give them back $110. However, the entire operation is fundamentally unsustainable. It produces no real wealth or value. It is simply a process of robbing new victims to pay off old ones. Sooner or later, the stream of new money will slow down and the scheme will inevitably collapse under its own weight. Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme was masterful in its apparent simplicity and consistency. He didn't promise unbelievable lottery-like returns that might raise suspicion. Instead, he promised something far more seductive to wealthy investors: steady, reliable gains of about 10 to 12% per year. To explain his remarkable success, Madoff claimed to be using a sophisticated investment strategy known as a split-strike conversion. He told his clients that he was buying a basket of large, stable stocks that mirrored the S&P 100 index. The truth, however, was that none of this was happening. There were no trades. Madoff never bought the stocks or options he claimed to be trading for his advisory clients. Instead, when a client gave him money, he simply deposited it into a single bank account at Chase Manhattan Bank. One of the most perplexing questions about the Madoff scandal is why so many smart, sophisticated people trusted him with their money for so long. Getting to invest with Bernie Madoff wasn't easy. You couldn't just walk in off the street and open an account. Instead, it was positioned as a privilege, an entry into an exclusive club. Madoff's personal reputation was his most valuable asset. He was not just some anonymous fund manager, he was a Wall Street icon. As a former chairman of the NASDAQ, he was seen as part of the very establishment that regulated the market. The trust in Madoff cascaded through entire communities. He became the go-to money manager for many families, who would invest their life savings and encourage their friends and relatives to do the same. Feeder funds brought in billions of dollars from investors around the world, many of whom did not even know their money was ultimately being managed by Madoff. The heart of Bernie Madoff's massive fraud was not located in a gleaming high-tech trading room, but in a surprisingly modest office space on the 17th floor of the Lipstick Building in Manhattan. This was 2 floors below his legitimate market-making business, and access was strictly controlled. Only a handful of trusted individuals, including his loyal lieutenant Frank DePascali and several back-office workers, were aware of the true nature of the work being done there. Their job was to manufacture a false reality. Every month they had to produce thousands of phony account statements to be sent to Madoff's clients. To do this, DePascali and his team would look at the historical stock market data for the previous month. They would pick stocks that had performed well and pretend that Madoff had bought them at their lowest price and sold them at their highest. This process, which they called creating the bucket, ensured that the fabricated returns always looked consistent and positive. For decades, Madoff's scheme seemed invincible, surviving market crashes, booms, and regulatory inquiries. However, by the mid-2000s, some cracks began to appear. A few astute financial analysts and investigators, most notably Harry Markopolos, started to question Madoff's returns and found them mathematically impossible. The turning point was the global financial crisis of 2008. The crisis was triggered by the collapse of the subprime mortgage market, but it quickly spread, causing a massive credit crunch and a stock market crash. People started pulling their money out of the markets in huge numbers. In the last few months of 2008, Madoff was hit with a tidal wave of redemption requests, totaling approximately $7 billion. This was a demand for cash that his scheme simply could not meet. Without new funds coming in, Madoff had no way to pay the clients who wanted their money back. In early December 2008, the pressure became unbearable. Madoff gathered his two sons, Mark and Andrew, who both worked in the legitimate market-making side of his firm, and confessed everything to them. He told them that the investment advisory part of the business was one big lie, a giant Ponzi scheme with losses of at least $50 billion. After absorbing the shocking confession, Mark and Andrew Madoff immediately consulted a lawyer who advised them to report their father to the federal authorities. The very next day, on December 11, 2008, FBI agents arrived at Bernie Madoff's Manhattan apartment. When they asked him if there was an innocent explanation, he reportedly said, "There is no innocent explanation." He was arrested on the spot. The collapse revealed a landscape of financial and emotional devastation that was breathtaking in its scope. The victims were thousands of people from all walks of life, wealthy celebrities, institutional investors, but also ordinary people, retirees, families, and charities. The actual cash losses were estimated to be around $18 billion, but the human cost was immense, destroying families, friendships, and communities. The legal fallout was immense. Bernie Madoff pleaded guilty to 11 federal crimes, including securities fraud, money laundering, and perjury. In June 2009, he was sentenced to 150 years in prison, the maximum possible sentence, ensuring he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Madoff died in federal prison in April 2021. A massive effort was launched to recover money for the victims. A court-appointed trustee, Irving Picard, has spent more than a decade painstakingly tracing and clawing back funds from so-called net winners. This complex legal process has been remarkably successful, recovering billions of dollars that have been distributed to the defrauded investors. The Madoff story serves as a powerful and enduring lesson for all investors. It is a stark reminder of the importance of due diligence and skepticism. It teaches us that if an investment seems too good to be true, offering consistently high returns with little or no risk, it probably is. Bernie Madoff's ability to fool so many for so long was built on the power of trust and reputation. His downfall reminds us that in the world of finance, trust must always be earned and, more importantly, verified.